You know, it's not so scary up here when the lights are so bright that you can't see.
That's right.
But good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Olga Ermolin. I'm Director of Engineering at MLSListings.
And I'm Greg Moore, CTO in Portland, Oregon, RMLS.
And I'm J. Pepper Martins. No, I'm not. I'm Hud Bixler, the MLS and Systems Director for San Francisco. Happy to be here.
And thank you for filling in.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Hud just learned about it less than 24 hours ago that he's going to speak, so.
On my flight, and here we are.
We are here to share our experience as 3 MLSs of adopting standards, recent standards, and most importantly, its impact on how our organizations function, the services we provide for our subscribers. We will talk about situations where standard maybe doesn't fit well into the business use case that we are trying to solve. We'll also talk about various RESO resources that helped us through the process besides the standards. And we'll talk about participation, adoption, and the whole kind of roadmap. How do we get from pain points to solutions?
So as we're saying, it's just not a data dictionary.
That was supposed to be Jay's joke,
Yeah, it was supposed to be
he's not
Jay's
here,
joke,
so
but I'm
Greg
not
is
a, you know.
filling in. Before we do that, Greg, who also has another hat of a board member and years of chairing a work group, let's take a look into what is this path that RESO gives us to get from a pain point to a solution.
So, I mean, as Olga's saying, you know, we start really with pain points, and it started long, long ago. And today, you know, on Thursday, we'll have a pain points meeting. So from there, you know, broker advisory is a great feeder for improvements of the standard. And then many of those things move into R&D where we work on business cases. And once those business cases are kind of, you know, moved and passed and ready to go live, they move forward to, you know, the folks that really do the heavy lifting. And normally that is transport, data dictionary.
That's right.
And you'll see, I mean, UPI and many of those other work groups really spun out of R&D because we needed those subject matter experts. And as we work through those, you know, there is a board liaison committee. Those are the chairs that get together monthly to talk about the work we're doing. And then the board of directors normally ratifies the work we're doing, and the circle continues. And we go right back to member input. So, I mean, you know, all of us really are the drivers of the RESO standard.
A little bit simplified look into that confusing chart. At the end of the day, it starts with us, members, practitioners, agents, brokers, MLSs, vendors that build solutions, pain points, issues, business use cases, come into either broker advisory or pain point sessions and come into research and development group, which funnels it into an appropriate work group. And from there, as the standard gets developed, it all comes back to us, to members, to implement, to adopt, and to solve the issue that it all started with. Few recent kind of gains or things, again, that our organizations have been taking advantage of or are using right now. One very notable that I want to mention is a RED-B course, which was, I think, introduced in 2019. Greg, your MLS has done it. My MLS right now, MLSListings, more than half of our staff is taking this course. Anybody from engineering, product owners, customer support teams, compliance teams, and they're finding it super helpful. We've seen implementation of ad-aided standard for APIs, and we will talk about it throughout the conference. And we are seeing POCs being built and the standard being used. And what's important, when standard gets finally implemented and adopted, we're flushing out various maybe issues or whatever corner cases that maybe we did not consider.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things that RESO has done in the last few years. If you've been to, you know, conferences, even over the last 2 or 3 years, you know, the ones in person and not, there's a lot of great work that's come through. You know, broker advisory has brought forward some really cool stuff. One of them being adding a resume, you know, to the roster resources. So, you don't have to go to every portal to put things in. So as we continue forward, and I mean, this is, as you can see, a very iterative process where, we take input and we just continue to improve and improve. And I think the speed's moving well, and the standard is continuing to evolve. Certainly as technology is evolving, more and more at a warp speed. I mean, look at that great picture of Rebecca this morning, and you've got to, is it real, is it not? So just lots of really cool things happening in the organization itself. And as Olga said, Red B is something that we've had many of our employees do. They're in the process, and we certainly would encourage you guys, if you're not taking that course, to have your employees join it, because we're finding it really brings great knowledge to folks on your engineering teams, your training teams, your help desk teams, all across your organization. So we'll talk about implementing the standards.
So unique property identifier is not a new standard. It's been around. MLSListings adopted it about a year ago, a little bit over. Last conference, I think, in Arizona, we shared our experience. At the time, we've only implemented unique property identifier for residential property types. Since then, we've added it to the remaining property types, except mobile home and business opportunity. We've extended it to our entire data share. This is 11 million, 12 million records. 20 years worth of data. I'm emphasizing this number because just try to remember what kind of tools we were using 20 years ago. How many system conversions some of that data has gone through. Think about data quality of those old records. But we still managed to achieve 94% coverage. By the way, we promise numbers, so you're going to hear a lot of numbers. 94% coverage of UPI generation based on standard, and the remaining 6%, I'm sure somebody is wondering about that, we've extended the standard to introduce a notion of synthetic UPI. So we're still covering the entire data set with this unique property identifier. And why did we do all that? Not for fun, obviously. We had very specific business objectives that we wanted to accomplish. One of the use cases that UPI solves is deduplication. The nature of our location is in such that we share service areas with our neighbors, with several MLSs around us, and to increase exposure, agents naturally enter listings in multiple systems, and through data share, we end up with a bunch of duplicates. So 10% of duplicates records is a lot when you try to generate accurate statistics. And UPI allows us to clean this data reliably, get rid of duplicates. Another important use case was to tie in history together. We see that 4 million UPIs generate about 32 million history records. This is life cycle of the property getting sold many times over the years, all of the transactional history, price reductions, price increases, status changes, all of that. So to unite all this history together and present it to an agent in one comprehensive view, again, very important, not depend on the case that where the listing came from. Through the data share, we have same property being sold in different MLSs. Agent doesn't need to know any of that. All we wanted to accomplish is that agent sees clear picture what happened to this property over the years, regardless where it came from. And unique property identifier allows us to do that. Work in progress is now to extend our data set, to enrich it, augment it, bring the data from outside, from various data sources, again, using UPI.
That's fantastic.
Besides UPI, another interesting case that happened to us was that we were working on solving an issue of hiding photos, and we used a standard, we used permission field for that, and turned out our neighbor and partner, SFAR, was doing the exact same thing pretty much in parallel with us.
We were doing the same thing, exactly. In fact, fielding many, many phone calls about this as well. And so, if we Turn back the clock just a little bit. The battle over removing the photos from the MLS was pretty intense. So we were getting phone calls. This is coming from brokers, from agents, from everybody to try and get those photos removed post-close. It's interesting how everybody wants the photos when they're looking for the listing, but once they buy that property, of course, privacy concerns pop up, which are important. We did have a civil code, 1088, that we've cited for the last several years that requires us to keep the photos in the MLS for 3 years. We're finding that 11% of the listings had 2 or fewer photos at closing, which is a problem for practitioners that are running comps and needing to be aware of the marketplace. Agents and appraisers were getting kind of upset about this because they would come back in and want to run comps and you wouldn't have the photos. So it's clear that there was a problem, no one's happy. So then what do? We start looking at opportunities. And we were thinking about ways that we could solve this quickly and fast. And then we thought, wait a minute, maybe we should talk to our MLS partners and talk to Olga, talk to Rapatoni, our data provider, and see if there's a solution within RESO. And so we found that. So it turns out within the data dictionary, there, yes, in fact, does have a value of private and public within the data dictionary. And we were curious if the standard had that, what we needed, and yes, it did. The standard saved us in this particular case. We were able to stay within compliance and use the standards that we all have grown to use over the last several years. The media modified includes the permission field with the values of private and public, which then by initiating that allows our downstream providers or downstream vendors to be able to recognize that private and public option on the photos. So then there's no more phone calls and emails, it's just done. It's done to the point of our downstream partners know that that photo is to be marked private, and our compliance department has relationships with those companies to verify that. So by January 30, 2023, we had statistics on how frequently the field was used. So what's cool about this, it's not just that the field was available, it's who's using it. So then we started to get statistics on how this is being used. We implemented it, people care about it, it gives us a great result. So we start seeing 20% of the systems, there's usage, and 7% of the organizations. We're able to actually look into that, we're talking about analytics now of the data. We're starting to actually see it in real time. So that's fantastic for us. So the results really are better data. If you take a look at these charts, you can see that 2018 through 2022, or 2022, 11% of the listings had missing photos. Big problem. Photos gone, no practitioners can use that data. Once we've implemented post September of 2022, it's down to 4%, which is fantastic. And even now, you see that 19% of the listings have private flagged photos instead. So we're seeing it actually happen with practice of our standards.
That's really great.
We thought so.
Just get
Are we ready?
Yeah, so again, it's better data.
Yes, so this is our kind of numbers, which is very interesting. Even though we have a different volume, different data set, the percentage-wise, it looks pretty similar, which just tells you that this is how people do how people practice real estate. Before first chart is 12 months before the release of the permission field, and about 2,000 listings at closing a year only had one photo left, the primary photo. And the second bar is data post-release over 12 years. We're still seeing deletions. We still have some work to do on education and training.
Absolutely.
But still still less, right? So just half of it, which means less customer support calls, less frustration. And orange portion is utilization of the permission flag.
Well, and your support team will be happy because they now, instead of citing a rule, they actually have an opportunity to show our agents how to engage and mark those photos as private. And then they start to see the downstream effect of that. So when we're talking about support, I run a team of 4 people. It's an MLS of 5,000 people. So we get quite a few phone calls. And when we launched this and we were able to give our team a solution, we saw in a tangible 60% reduction in support time regarding our photos. So we use a help desk, as most of you guys probably do if you're in the MLS support team, and you're able to see that in real time, 60% decrease. And it doesn't really factor our communications with our MLS partners through the NorCal Alliance. So this is just about what was happening at San Francisco. But we would also engage with Bridge MLS, with MLSListings, with MetroList, et cetera. And it would be their listing, but we would have to make the the change of the photos anyway. So it decreased that amount of resources, which is real time and real money. And again, I mentioned this before, but easier implementation with the vendors. It's a flag, we have communication about that. They know that when they see that flag, that photo is to be marked private. Bob's your uncle. That would be a J joke. Bob's your uncle. I think I got it. Okay, cool. Let's move on.
So we talked about adopting standards, right? But RESO actually has other resources to offer that also save time and money when you implement or when you solve a various business case. And Greg, you just had some of that experience.
Yeah, I mean, we had a really interesting business case where I had, quickly went to the wiki to solve my problem. And that was when we turned our red server off, we forgot to bring up the contacts resource for one of our vendors. So, basically what we went to was, basically I went to the wiki. I mean, it's kind of become my friend. As you can see, it has great analytics in it, and it really has really a whole bunch of, let me back up a little bit, a whole bunch of fields. I mean, when I went to the contacts resource, there was, a giant list of fields, and it became just a simple mapping exercise for us. I hate to, I figure I'd show you guys a little bit of code, because the one challenge we've really found with converting, like Olga says, data that's now 20 plus years old is it kind of needs to be cleaned up to be standardized data. So, that probably took more time than, this column matches that column for us. So we're finding that the tools that are available to you, be it analytics, I think you'll see some cool bubble graphs that really show kind of the overlaps between, markets that may bump into each other or don't. But there really are, it's an amazing bunch of tools available for you as you dig into, the standards. So, I mean, it wasn't like I had to go out and come up with new names or nomenclatures. It really told me, how long the field can be. All that great information was there. And I mean, if you look at the wiki, all the resources are there. And I mean, basically the data dictionary boiled down to, the nuts and bolts of putting your data together and lining it up. So as we said, it was fast, it was very inexpensive, and we got to solve our pain point problem where Greg said, "Ooh, you know what? We forgot something." But within about 2 weeks, we had data to the vendor in a standard way, so we were really speaking the same language. So it was fast for them to kind of pull it up, implement it, and fill the hole for our customers that we had as we moved along. And honestly, there are times where the standard doesn't fit your need.
Right.
I mean, you go to the wiki, and you Google something, and it doesn't really fit today's technology. It may have fit earlier, but evolving that standard is certainly a key.
Right. So we recently started working on utilizing the latest and greatest various technologies, APIs that allow you to tag your photos. And this technology has evolved over the last few years dramatically. I'm sure many of us are enjoying it right now. It's a lot of fun. But when it's one thing to extract intelligence from an image, and Data Dictionary currently has a really good support for that. There is a field image of and media resource that has a pretty good comprehensive list enumeration of a lot of things you can get out of the property image. But then we're on the next step. What do we do with that? We want to build features around it. Image search, image grouping, things like that. And the way standard is defined right now does not really support it. I don't want to go into details right now. If anybody wants to talk about it, I think there is Mimosa Bar scheduled tomorrow. That would be a great venue for that. So what to do when you have a use case? The standard is in place for a couple of years, but it doesn't really work for you. Maybe it doesn't work for someone else. So we brought it up to R&D first. We documented our questions, inconsistencies that we saw. We wrote a proposal, what we would like it to see, brought it to data dictionary. It's been discussed in, I think, last meeting. And as we are working on our features and preparing to make them available to our brokers and their data consultants that support their websites, hopefully when we converge in the work in data dictionary, we converge and our solution will be compliant and based on standard. This little red box in the corner that's been popping up throughout the presentation is a big shout out to have this visibility, big shout out to RESO, to have the visibility, how the field is used is really important part of this process. Especially when you suggest a change to the standard, how many orgs are going to be affected? How many people will have to go back and review their current implementation? So we always use this information when we do this kind of analysis and work. We talked about standard being ready, right out of the box. We talked about standard being there, but maybe not fully fitting your needs. But market is changing. We all see various new conditions rising in our markets, new practices that agents and brokers adapting by because there are new technologies available. And for some of them, standard doesn't exist yet. And what do we do in those cases? And again, Greg and Hud, both of you have this situation going on.
Yeah, so I mean, think of COVID, and I mean, it really changed the way, at least for us, and I'm sure for most MLSs across the country, how people search for properties. You know, they were looking for large backyards, places to work. I mean, you know, extra bedrooms or dens in homes, et cetera. And another big lift was obviously, you know, and in Portland and many of our surrounding, you know, communities, ADUs have become a real big piece of the market. In Portland, everything's now in R2 zoning. So, I mean, ADUs are encouraged. So when we dug into the wiki, you'd find an ADU, yes, in a few other fields. But we really needed, you know, a way to describe what that particular unit was, because it certainly brings value, and it brought a lot of interest to the listings that were happening. So adding an ADU or being able to, or even having one already on the property really made a big difference in their marketing. So as you can see, I mean, you know, there's all kinds of cool units. And I mean, I'm kind of stuck on Dwell. I keep going to look at all these really cool little funky places they're putting on. You know, it'd be nice to have an office removed from the house. So what we did is we reached out to really our subject matter experts. And I mean, data speaks to us, right? You go find the folks who are selling the most listings with ADUs on them. And then you really start finding out what kind of information do they want. And it's amazing, you know, in my olden days, this was a whole listing input sheet. I mean, 2 pages of data, wow. And I mean, we're talking about, are there separate, you know, utility meters in the place? You have to make sure it has a permit, how many beds and baths, what kind of kitchen utilities there are. So really define a real ADU. I mean, you know, I hate to be old, but this isn't the old granny unit downstairs where grandma lived. You know, this is really a home for people, you know, to live. So, I mean, and what did we do next? We started to share this form. So, you know, we sent it out to some of our, you know, MLSs and to Data Dictionary. Because if we're going to build it, like Olga says, the smart thing to do is at least get, you know, try and really nail the standard as closely as we can. Understanding as it evolves, we can be a little bit nimble, add some more fields, change a few field names under the hood, et cetera. But really to provide at least a rich basis when the, you know, standard doesn't work. And as Olga said, I'm very lucky to be the R&D chair, but this is something any of you guys can do. When you find pain points, like Olga did with pictures, you know, there's a process for that. And we're all best to do it, you know, the RESO way, or feed the RESO standard. So when people are implementing, like the private things,
that's right,
you know, the vendors understand what we're doing and how to manage this data also.
It connects everybody. You know,
it really
that's the important thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, you know, and the other thing we did is we're finding that, you know, you can do all kinds of amazing things with pictures. Let's be honest. I mean, you know, you can alter pictures, everything. And you can see here was another pain point where we got a call to our help desk with somebody in a complete panic because they went to show a client a house and there wasn't any furniture in the house. The pictures, I mean, the walls weren't even the same color. So it's like, what happened?
Overnight.
You know, yeah, you know, how did this place get emptied out? And oh my gosh, what did they do, right?
That's right.
But we really found out that, you know, technology is wonderful and you can virtually stage homes. They weren't paying somebody to come in and do these things. This is what the house could look like really, you know, as it got cleaned up or dusted up or whatever. So we decided we would put a watermark on virtually staged homes and, you know, model homes. So when you pull up to the new construction subdivision, you know, things are being stick-built, et cetera, but at least there's a representation of what it is that, you know, your client and you may be looking at. And that's really grown into kind of this idea of media alterations. Because, you know, we're seeing vendors who have, you know, great tools to help you, you know, make things look a little more attractive. You know, but in the twilight, your house may not kind of shimmer and glisten a little bit, but it sure looks good in pictures. So we've worked through this. And I mean, it was, you know, one of those RESO processes. We had a pain point. We talked about it, believe it or not, at the board. And then we kind of moved it along into, you know, the R&D work group. I can shout out my friend from Matt Cohen. He'd written this really cool article that resonated about this time. And next thing you know, we've got a standard, again, that can iterate and be built on. These are enumerations that you add to pictures, just like Olga's thing, you know, just like Olga's, you know, image of. So, you know, for all of us, for MLSListings, for SFAR, and for RMLS, we've got, you know, the cookbook, as I like to call it, on how you just put these things together.
So at the end of the day, this is our experience of
Yes.
3 MLSs, but obviously that's just one side of the vision, and there's so many other players in this industry, agents, brokers, of course, vendors, startups, where everyone has their own perspective and their own experience, which is extremely helpful and valuable and needed. And if there is a new condition, new market condition emerging in your area, or new business practice is emerging, or new maybe a business case or use case, chances are it's probably happening somewhere else. And chances are someone is already working on it or thinking about it. And if not, then you could be the first one to bring it up and help the rest. We hope you find it helpful. If you have any questions, please contact Jay. His contact information was on the is on the first
I'll
slide.
forward the email.
And if you have any questions, you know how we look and where to find us.
Yeah, come and see us. Honestly, thank you. Because we're not unique. I mean, this was the cool thing about putting this presentation together, was we really found that, you know, things resonate between us, and the work that we're doing independently, really we should talk a little bit more, you know, with your peers.
Communicate, collaborate, innovate.
You got it.
That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You all.